expressed on this program are not those of intellectualradio.com, its subsidiaries, or sponsors. Encouraging, educating, and empowering you into action. This is Warriors Talk with your host, Lady ReShell.
Hello. Welcome to Warriors Talk with author and founder Lady ReShell, where we move away from awareness towards action. It's Health and Wellness Monday, and our topic for today is parenting a child with type 1 diabetes. We are live on Intellectual Radio. We just heard from the Drive at 5 with Roman. Keep it locked right here on Intellectual Radio and allow us to feed your brain. On the last episode of Warriors Talk, I spoke with the authors of There is Beauty Beyond the Scars. You can get the book on YouTube, but head on over to YouTube so you can stay connected for any episodes that you may have missed. The quote of the day is, "No one gets an easy pass in life. We all meet struggles while pursuing our dreams. Sometimes our knees shake while facing giants, and sometimes our feet get knocked from under us. But those are our most defining moments." Here are your trending topics for today. A shooter at a bank in downtown Louisville killed at least 4 people, including 2 friends of the governor, and wounded at least 9 others today, police said. The suspect also was dead. The 15th mass killing in the country this year comes just 2 weeks after a former student killed 3 children and 3 adults at a Christian elementary school in Nashville, Tennessee. Police in Louisville arrived as gunshots were still being fired inside the Old National Bank and exchanged fire with the shooter. Louisville Metro Police Department Deputy Chief Paul Humphrey said at a news conference it wasn't clear whether the shooter killed himself or was shot by officers. That is your trending topic for today. We are grateful for our sponsor, Emmanuel Church of God in Christ, with Pastor Michael Richardson, who has a special message for us.
Greetings, I am Pastor Michael Richardson.
And I am First Lady Anastasia Richardson from the Emmanuel Church of God in Christ. We're located at 3058 West Van Buren in Chicago, Illinois. We are building upon a solid foundation.
And we're inviting you to join us every Sunday morning on Facebook Live at Emmanuel Kojic at 10:15 Central Standard Time. And you can also view our videos on our YouTube channel at Emmanuel Kojic-MR. Once again, this is Pastor Michael Richardson
and First Lady Anastasia Richardson, and we're from the Emmanuel Church of God in Christ. We are building upon a solid foundation.
If you are tuned in on any form of social media, like the show, share the show, invite someone else in that you feel may benefit from this valuable information. Our topic, parenting a child with type 1 diabetes. What is type 1 diabetes? Well, first off, I want to give you some stats as it relates to type 1 diabetes that some of us can relate to. Type 1 diabetes affects about 1 in 400 children, adolescents, and young adults under the age of 20. And people with type 1 diabetes, they can't take insulin, and without insulin, the glucose is actually stuck in the bloodstream, and that leads to them having high glucose in the blood. So people with type 1 diabetes, they have a lack of insulin. With type 1 diabetes, your pancreas does not make insulin altogether. So they need insulin on a daily basis to allow the sugar to move in the bloodstream to be used for energy. We know that sugar equals energy. The majority of the food that we eat, it turns into sugar so that we can use it as energy. So currently, once you are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, it's a lifelong disease and it cannot be cured. So there is no cure for type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes can develop at any age, but it usually appears before the age of 40. And particularly, they used to call it juvenile diabetes. because most of the individuals were being diagnosed were under the age of 20, but we know that individuals all the way up until they say 40, you can be diagnosed with type 1. So around 10% of all diabetics are type 1. So what happens in type 1? If you're diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, like what does that mean? Well, in type 1, the body, again, the immune system attacks. It attacks itself and it destroys the cells so that the pancreas can not make any insulin. So that the body, you have to actually, if you know someone who is a diabetic, type 1 or type 2, some of them have to take insulin shots. So type 2, the body still makes insulin, right? The pancreas still works. It's just the body doesn't know what to do with the insulin. So that's the difference between type 1 and type 2. Type 1, the body doesn't make any insulin, right? The pancreas not making any insulin. Type 2, the pancreas does make insulin, but the body is like, what do we do with this insulin that's been made? So that's the difference between type 1 and type 2. So why do some people get diagnosed with type 1 diabetes? Well, honestly, they don't know. The doctors do not know why some people get diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. They know that some people may have the gene that puts you at a predisposition for diabetes, but they're saying that that's not enough to turn that gene on, that something else has to happen in order for that gene to be turned on. It could be maybe a virus that you may have that may turn that key for it to be type 1 diabetes. It could be some sort of trauma in your life, but the scientists and the doctors are saying they don't know what caused diabetes. They're thinking maybe it could be something triggered in your environment, but they're saying that the gene alone is not enough to turn on the diabetes gene. So is your child at risk for diabetes? Like, how do you know if your child is at risk for diabetes? So they said if you are a man with type 1 diabetes, the odds of your child developing type 1 diabetes is 1 in 17. So I had a sister. My oldest sister was actually type 1 diabetic. And so far in my family, other than my daughter, she was the only one that I know in my family that had type 1 diabetes. Diabetes does run in my family, mainly type 2, but she did deal with type 1. So that's why when my daughter was diagnosed, I kind of knew some of the conditions or what type 1 actually causes and does to the body. So if you are a woman with type 1, then your child, if you had the child before the age of 25, then you have a 1 in 25 chance of your child getting type 1 diabetes. If the child was born after you were 25, then it's a 1 in 100, they say, chance of your child being diagnosed with diabetes. If your child risk is double, so if you had diabetes before the age of 11, then it doubles the risk. If you and your husband are type 1 diabetes, then your child has a 1 in 10 chance or 1 in 4 chance of them developing type 1 diabetes. So let's talk about some of the signs and symptoms as it relates to diabetes, type 1 diabetes. Like, how do you know that you have type 1 diabetes? And some of the signs, they say they can develop very quickly in children, but then in adults, sometimes it takes longer than a few days and a few weeks. So a person may feel very thirsty. I know for my daughter, she was real thirsty one night, just kept going to get water. And I'm looking at her like, okay, like throughout the night, I just started watching her like go get water or go to the bathroom. And I'm thinking like, okay, maybe in my mind, I was thinking maybe she has some type of urinary tract infection or something. Like never in the back of my mind did it come to me and say, oh, this could be diabetes. I'm thinking like, okay, maybe she's just having a night to where she's just thirsty, and just going to the bathroom. So I never thought that it would be diabetes. So you can have a night where you're just feeling so thirsty that water is just not quenching your thirst. So you just keep drinking the water. And when you're drinking the water, that leads to you going to the bathroom. So you're running to the bathroom. all throughout the night. And it normally happens at night. All throughout the night, you're going through the bathroom, or you may have an accident in the bed to where you're not able to even hold it. So you end up using the bathroom in the bed. There may be fatigue. You may feel like I have no energy. Like, I don't even know, all of a sudden I'm just so tired. Where is this coming from? It's not like you have been doing a lot that day, but for some reason you have no energy to do anything. You may have an unexplained weight loss or a loss of muscle bulk in your body, and you're not trying to lose weight. You're eating regularly, but for some reason, like, weeks and weeks and days, is like all of a sudden you're just starting to lose like weight, and you're not even trying to lose weight. You can have what they call a persistent infection. For women, it's a yeast infection. Like, you constantly keep having these yeast infections, and you're like, where is this coming from? Like, and you're wondering. And for the child, this could happen overnight. So overnight, if you're a parent and you know that your child is not the one that normally gets up and runs to the bathroom at night, so then you start watching them. So I started watching my daughter that night, and then that morning I just got up and took her to urgent care. And I was like, okay, I think she may have a urinary tract infection. They're like, okay, let's just see what's going on. And then right away they was like, yeah, no, that's not it. And then they started talking about, her levels, her blood levels. And I'm just like, okay, where is this coming from? And so for the child, it'll happen overnight. Again, for an adult, you have to kind of watch yourself, like you're drinking more, you're losing weight, you're thirsty, you're fatigued, like, okay, what's going on with me that I'm feeling these things? You also could have this fruity smell on your breath, almost smell like fruit, right? And that lets you know that it's excess sugar in your blood. And that's one way you can tell if somebody is a diabetic, just by smelling that on their breath. You may have a change in your vision. Your vision, when your levels are high, it messes with your vision. So you might have problems with your eyesight. Just drinking more than you normally would do, going to the bathroom normally than you would at night. Those are some things that, as a child and as a grown-up, that you should look for when it comes to type 1 diabetes. So what are the treatment or just the management of type 1 diabetes? The main thing that they want you to do is to manage your blood levels, right? Because if you don't manage the blood levels, it will cause problems later on in life, right? It could cause problems with your heart. It could cause problems with your kidney. It can cause problems. People may have had a stroke, like different things. When it comes to diabetes, it plays with, so you can't play with the blood sugar. You have to make sure that you're within that healthy range when it comes to the blood sugar. And they have things now better than they did back in the day. They have things that help you monitor your blood sugar. One is called a Dexcom, which my daughter is on the Dexcom, and it's like a little bitty sensor that you can stick on different parts of your body. And you put the sensor information in your phone, if you have a smartphone, and it will communicate. It's like a little needle that sticks her so that she won't have to stick herself in the finger. Because just imagine if you have to do this for the rest of your life and you're constantly sticking your fingers, like it is wear and tear on your body. So they have come up with this device called a Dexcom, to where she does not have to stick herself in her fingers anymore. She just put the sensor on her body and it automatically will just check her blood sugar. And then I am hooked up on her plan, so it will send me if her blood levels are low, if her blood levels are high. It will send an alert, like an alarm will sound off so that you can't miss it, so that, okay, they send, you need to do something about this, her blood levels are low. So if she's away doing something and I'm not with her, and, she may not know, she may not feel that, her blood levels are low, her blood levels are too high. And then I could send her a message or call her and be like, hey, check your levels. You need to, it sent me a message saying it's high. She may be away from, you just don't know. She may not be at her phone at that time. She could be playing a sport, she could be doing anything and not know. And at least it'll send a message to my phone so I can maybe contact the coach and say, hey, check her out to see what's going on. So the Dexcom is a lifesaver when it comes to individuals with type 1 diabetes. So even type 2, because my mom is type 2 and she uses the Dexcom as well. So it's a lifesaver because they don't have to stick themselves in their fingers. Another way to manage or treat type 1 diabetes is by counting carbs. So every time that my daughter eats, she has to count carbs. And when she counts the carb, they give her this formula, and the formula tells her how much carbs she's eating and how much insulin she needs to take for those carbs. And she has to do it for every single meal. Any carb that's over 8 grams, she has to take insulin for. And this is something that she has to do, just do it throughout her life. So when she checks her blood levels, a good blood sugar is anywhere from 80 to 120, right? So from 80 to 120, if it's lower than 80, then you have to eat some type of snack to bring it up. So anything like with 15 carbs will help bring it up. It could be a juice, it could be milk, it could be some Skittles, like anything that's 15 carbs of sugar will help bring your levels up. If it's higher than 120, then you know that you have to do some type of correction, some type of insulin correction. So based on the formula that your endocrinologist give you, then you take that and you will correct. And the correction is so that you won't be walking around daily with these high blood sugars. Another thing that they encourage you to do is to make sure that you exercise and you eat right. It's important for people who are diabetic to exercise, to get moving. It really helps with your sugar levels. As far as dieting, it helps that you eat healthy. I'm not going to say diet, but just to eat a healthy, balanced meal and make sure that you are counting those carbs, because counting those carbs is what's going to help keep your blood sugar low. And make sure that you're getting regular medical checkups. So for most people who are diabetic, they have to go, like my daughter, every 3 months. They want to see you every 3 months. And the reason is because if anything is happening with you, they can catch it early. If your formula is maybe making you sick or making your blood levels too low or making it too high, then they can take that time to make a correction so that you won't be going months and months at a time with a low or high blood level. So it's important that any type of issues that you're having when it comes to your diabetes, that you're telling them when you get to that medical appointment. Again, write it down, record it, send your doctor an email to where you can address it when you get there and you won't have to be waiting 3 more months. So we know that diabetes, it causes a wear and tear on your kidneys, your eyes, your heart, your circulatory system. And so this is why it's important to make sure you just stay as close as you can to healthy blood levels. And just watching my daughter go through this, and even my mom is at the point, again, she's type 2, she's at the point to where her doctor mentioned taking her off of the diabetes medicine. And with type 2, for some people, lifestyle change could have you taken off of the medicine. So because of her lifestyle changes, her doctor is wanting to take her off the medicine and she doesn't need it. So that's different. But with type 1, it's different because you need the insulin. You need the insulin because your pancreas, again, is not making that insulin. And without that insulin, you will die. So I've learned that there's no perfect person that's a diabetic. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's going to always have perfect numbers. You may have some highs and lows one day. I don't care how good you are with your diabetes management. There are going to be some highs and there are going to be some lows. So don't beat yourself up about it. Don't beat your child up about it because it's not perfect. It's not perfect. Remember, there's no cure for type 1 diabetes. It's only management, right? Only management and treatment. So number 5 is insulin, you can get it through a pen or you can get it through a pump. So now, they used to have those syringes where you draw the insulin out and then shoot yourself. Well, now they have these pens and you just put the little needle on the pen and you dial the number to how many units the doctor said that you're supposed to have and you shoot yourself with the pen. Now, the pen is convenient because before, again, they had the syringes. So now they have what we call the pump. Some people want to be on a pump, some people don't. It just depends on what you feel at that time. But the pump is a device that's hooked to you and it has a tube, and you would put the insulin in like every 3 days, and you don't have to worry about sticking yourself because the insulin is gonna once you calculate your carbs, it's gonna tell your phone is gonna talk to the insulin pump to tell the pump how much insulin to give you. So remember, I told you the Dexcom, it'll take your blood level so you don't have to stick yourself, and then you can have the pump to where it's gonna pump the insulin in you. So for somebody who don't want to stick themselves and don't want to have to worry about giving themselves the insulin, the pump and the Dexcom would be great. So it just depends on if you qualify for it, because the doctor has to actually let you know if you're ready to graduate to those things. So either the pen or the insulin. So my daughter is on the pen. She's not on the pump. She has the pump, but she does not want to use the pump. With the pump becomes a lot of responsibility, and she's not ready to use the pump yet. I think maybe as she gets older, because she was diagnosed at 11, she's 16 right now. So I think as she maybe gets older, working, doing stuff out in life, she may opt to get the pump. Right now, she doesn't want the pump because she's afraid that, somebody at school may see the tubing, or the tubing may come out when she does hip hop dance. The tubing may come out and she may not know that it came out, and then she's not getting insulin. So it just depends on what your doctor has recommended for you. Now, when you're dealing with type 1 and type 2, you may deal with hyperglycemia. And this is when your blood sugars can be really high. And for kids, I know, again, there's that thirsty, there's that peeing, unusual weight loss. I can always tell when my daughter, her blood levels are too high because she acts a certain way. She's drinking, I'm thirsty. And I can just watch and tell what she's going through when she is hypoglycemic. So you just have to kind of watch them to see what's going on with them. There also could be dealing with hypoglycemia, which is the blood levels is too low. I can always tell when her blood is too low. She has no energy. She complains of a headache. She doesn't want to do anything. Sometimes she has an attitude. She has anxiety. You can kind of tell once your child has been through it, you can kind of pick up on, her levels are low or her levels are high. But so that you can take the guessing game out of that, the Dexcom will help you take the guessing game out of that, because it'll tell you when your child is too low or when your child is too high, so that you won't miss anything. Because sometimes you just get busy with life and you have other children, you're not really paying attention. So sometimes your child can go into a diabetic, they call it DKA. This is when the insulin, remember I mentioned the pump. So the pump has this tube, and the tube will give you so much insulin. But if that tube come loose, then you're not getting insulin, and your body could go into a diabetic ketosis, right? So this happened to my daughter last weekend. She ended up getting strep throat, and when somebody is a diabetic and they get a cold or the flu or anything, it just takes a toll on their body. So the strep throat led to her being really sick, not being able to eat. She ended up throwing up and was nauseous. She had nausea. She was nauseated, and she had a headache. She just had all these things going on, a stomach ache. And all these things are DKA, is diabetic ketosis. And I'm just like, okay. And if you are not paying attention, you may just think, it's just a strep throat. And it wasn't. she wasn't getting the insulin because she wasn't eating. So I ended up having to rush her into the emergency room. And right away, when I got in there, they already knew what it was. And I'm just like, I was hoping that it wasn't it, but that's what it was. So they ended up keeping her for at least 2 days because now she was dehydrated because she was throwing up. She wasn't getting the insulin. And they said, when you're not getting enough insulin in your body, the glucose cells, the body starts to break down. So it starts to go after the fat in your body to get the sugar because it doesn't have the food, right? It doesn't have the carbs. You're breaking down the carbs, it doesn't have the insulin. So now it's going to start using your fat on your body in order to try to get the sugar, which can be deadly for you. So some people may have those different symptoms of the throwing up, the headaches, the abdominal pain. It could be severe as to you being unconscious or you going in a coma. And thank God my daughter didn't get that far. But if you're not really paying attention, you may just think, oh, she's just not feeling well because she has a strep throat. But when they're diabetic, you have to really pay attention because they could easily turn into DKA. And they kept her for 2 days, so they had to do an insulin drip to make sure she was getting insulin around the clock. They had to do to make sure she was getting her fluids, and so they had to get her blood was acidic because she wasn't getting the insulin, right? So they had to make sure that they watch her blood to get it to be normal, and all of that took time. It took like 2 days for them to get her to where she needed to be. And her doctor told me, we're going to do it slow and steady. We're not going to overload her with fluids or insulin. We're going to take our time and we're going to do it slow and steady. And that when she got to the hospital, her numbers didn't even register on the glucose machine. So that's how they knew it was really high. By the end of the night, we had to be rushed over to Lurie's Children's Hospital. So we had to be rushed over there because the one that we went to, they didn't specialize in peds for endocrinology. So they sent us over there. And they actually took us in the paramedics over there. So they watched her, and by the end of the night, her levels got down to 163. So it was slow and steady. And then the whole time she was there after that night, her numbers were really good. And they couldn't give her no food that night. So no food, nothing to drink. And the whole night she was like, Mom, I'm hungry. Mom, I'm thirsty. Can you give me something to drink? And the nurse and the doctor was like, don't give her anything to drink. They just gave her this little sponge with some water in a cup and she could use that. But I could not give her nothing to drink. And I felt so bad. And she was just like, Mom, I'm so thirsty. Like, can you go give me some water? And I was like, they said you can't have anything to drink. And they said the reason why is because they wanted her numbers to be pure, right? And if they given her stuff to drink, it's going to mess with the numbers, and they didn't want to overload her with fluids. I'm like, oh my God. Hey, Lisa. I'm like, oh my God. So I had to go through that whole night with her begging me for something to drink, and I could not give her anything to drink. And I felt so bad that I couldn't, but I had to just follow what the doctors told me to do. So it was a scary thing to go through because she was diagnosed in 17 and we haven't been in the hospital since she was diagnosed. So when you're diagnosed, they automatically keep you when you're first diagnosed to make sure that they give you all the education that you need as it relates to just being diagnosed. They want to make sure you're able to give yourself a shot. They want to make sure you're able to count your carbs. They just want to make sure that you're in a good headspace, because this is overwhelming, right? You're being told that you have diabetes at 11 and that now you're going to have to give yourself a shot for the rest of your life. And now you're going to have to count carbs every single time that you eat. Like that can be overwhelming for an adult, not let alone a child. So let's talk about some things that as a parent that you should know if your child is diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Number one, acknowledge that this diagnosis is overwhelming, right? It's overwhelming. And as a parent, you start thinking about, you feel guilty, like, oh my God, like, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? Did I miss something? Like, what happened to when my child is being diagnosed with diabetes? And remember I said, They don't know what caused diabetes. So don't beat yourself up thinking that it's something you did, because it's nothing that you did. But acknowledge that, okay, this right here is overwhelming, but we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it. So the second thing that a parent needs to know when it comes to type 1 diabetes, that it could be stressful, not just for your child's body, but on your child's mind. So I would encourage you to make sure that you get your child a counselor or a therapist, because there may be some things that they don't want to tell you, that they may be afraid to tell you or anybody else. And so don't allow them to keep all of that inside of them. Get them some help so that they can talk to somebody else and get those feelings out, because it's going to be devastating for them as well as you. So you and the other family members may need to get help as well, just to get through this diagnosis, the initial diagnosis. Number 3, normalize the disease so that your child won't feel ashamed. My daughter really doesn't want anybody to know that she's a type 1 diabetic. Like, she doesn't. And a lot of times they don't want people to know, because people will look at them as them being weak or damaged goods. And, like, what's wrong with you that, you have to take these insulin shots for the rest of your life? So she tends to not tell anybody. Her friend group, like the girls that are in her friend group, they know, because they are around her, and in case her levels go low, then they will know what to do. They know, okay, if it's low, we need to get her something to eat. If it's high, we need to make sure she corrects. So they tend to, watch out for her. But she doesn't tell a lot of people. Not even, I had to call up to the school to tell the counselor, the nurse knew, but she didn't want, like, the teachers. I'm like, the teachers have to know, just in case your levels get low, they know what to do. So the teachers know, but they're not allowed to tell any of the students. And if she needs to, they have a plan for individuals who have diabetes. You have this plan where if you need to leave class because you're not feeling well, or you need to go to the nurse, like, you're not going to get penalized for doing that. If she is taking a test, they will pull her to take a test in a different area with students who may be dealing with the same thing, so that they're able to leave, go to the restroom, go get snacks if they're not feeling well. Like, when she was out of school these past couple of days, the teachers and the counselors was like, don't worry about it. We got her work. She can make it up whenever. There's no deadline on it. So it's important as a parent, as an advocate for your child, that you communicate with the people at the school. I'm not saying you have to tell everybody in the school, but at least, the teachers need to know, so that they're able to assist her if they see that she's low and she's not saying anything. They can, like, discreetly pull her to the side or pull her out or whatever. So, and I think for her, it saves her, like, I don't want to say, she feels like it's a shame that comes with having this diabetes. And as a parent, you have to make sure that they don't feel ashamed, that you make sure you normalize it. And even when you're around your other children and you guys are eating, don't single that person out. Everybody's eating the same thing, right? She's counting carbs on exactly what we're eating. Don't make them feel like, they're separate. And sometimes as parents, we do that because we just don't know any better. Another thing you could do as a parent is celebrate the positives. So if that child is giving themselves shots, they have great numbers, then celebrate that, celebrate what they're doing so that they feel better. The studies show that when you celebrate a child and you give them praise, when it comes to the type 1 diabetes, they do better. But when you tell them, oh, you're doing so bad, your numbers are high, what's wrong with you? Why can't you give yourself these shots? Like, that doesn't help. It's not going to push them to do better. So you have to make sure that you're celebrating the positive. And just know that the younger the child is when they're diagnosed, the more challenging it's going to be, because when they're younger, if they're really young, they can't even give themselves their own shots, right? If you have a baby that's diagnosed at 5, that 5-year-old is not giving themselves shots, right? My daughter was 11, so she was able to give herself shots. They made sure before she left the hospital that she was able to give herself shots. And I was able to help her. And she got to the point where she didn't want me to help her. She's like, "Mom, I got it. I got it." And I'm like, "Are you sure?" She's like, "Yeah." So at first she wanted me to help her. She wanted me to help her count carbs. She wanted me to give her a shot. And then after she got so to where she could do it, she's like, "No, I got this. I don't need you to help me." But just know the younger they are, the more help that they're going to need. And as they get a little older, give them that freedom. Just make sure that you get the devices like the Dexcom where you're able to still monitor them, but not hover over them. Hey, Kenya. Kenya said this is some very helpful information. Thank you, Kenya. I'm glad that somebody is benefiting from the information. I know it helped me when my daughter was diagnosed. Number 6, as a parent, you should know that your child didn't do anything to cause type 1 diabetes. Remember, I said they don't even know what caused type 1 diabetes. They have no idea. They know that some people have the gene, but then again, they don't know what makes that gene turn on to where that child, because some children are diagnosed younger and some may not be diagnosed until they're 19. My daughter was diagnosed at 11. Some people are diagnosed at 8. So they don't know what happens in a child's life to make that gene turn on. But just know that they didn't do anything to make it happen. Hey, Lisa. Lisa said, yes, this is helpful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Number 7, encourage your child to be open about their disease with the school nurse, the classmates, and the teachers. I talked about that. You have to encourage them to do it. I don't force my daughter to tell everybody, but I encourage her to, especially, like I said, her friend group, because if something happens to her, they need to know how to help you, right? And if this is your friend group, they're going to care. They're not going to treat you any different. They want to know what's going on with you. They want to know, excuse me, why you're not at school, why you're fatigued, what's going on with you. So share with them so that they can help you. And number 8, as a parent, give you and your child grace. As you're going through this, give yourself some grace because you're going to need it. This is not an easy thing to accept when you hear that your child has diabetes. Again, a parent, you deal with guilt because you think it's something that you did or you didn't do to cause this for your child. But just know that it has nothing to do with anything that you did. The best thing that you could do for your child is to educate yourself on what type 1 diabetes does and how you can best take care of your child so that you can advocate for your child. Because a lot of times we can't even advocate for our child if you don't know. If you haven't educated yourself, you're not going to know how to help your child when it comes to diabetes. So I wanted to talk really quickly about some of the myths that they have out here, and I probably covered most of them anyway, that it comes when it deals with diabetes. And one of them it's not my child's fault. And it says when a child is first diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, it could be first emotions for parents. You feel the guilt. This is because many of the initial assumptions is that diet plays a role in the condition, but with type 1 diabetes, diet does not play a role. With type 1 diabetes, we know that it's an autoimmune disease, and currently, again, they don't know why it happens, and there's no cure, so don't blame yourself, don't blame the child. Number 2, children with diabetes can't have sweets ever. And it says if a child has type 1 diabetes, the child and his family, you have to think about what you eat, but it doesn't stop the child from participating in birthdays or having ice creams. You just have to make sure that you're counting the carbs. Number 3, because your child is on insulin, that they can eat whatever they want. That's not true. Although that you're counting those carbs, you still want to make sure that your child has a healthy diet when it comes to type 1 diabetes. It's going to help them feel better. It's going to help their sugar process better. It's going to help them have numbers between that 80 and 120 blood sugar level. Number 4, kids with type 1 diabetes are always in the hospital all the time. And I mentioned before, the first time that you are diagnosed, the child stays in the hospital for a couple of days, and that's to make sure that you get the education that you need. The only time you probably end up there is if you go into that DKA stage, is when that insulin is not getting to that bloodstream and you're having problems to where now your body is going to look for the fat and to try to get that energy. And you have to make sure that you get to the hospital if you have abdominal pain, if you're throwing up, if you're having headaches. Make sure that you get your child to the hospital right away so that they can get them on the fluids. They can get that insulin going inside of them and get their blood clean from it being acidic. The next one says, a child with type 1 diabetes will have to adjust her expectations in life. Nope, they can do the same thing that any other child can do. The only thing is that they just have to make sure that they're managing their diabetes. So they don't have to change anything that they're doing in life. The modifications just comes when they are making sure that if they're playing sports, if you're making sure that you're checking your levels before you play, you have some type of snack to make sure that, when you're done playing, you're able to, if you're low, you can take that snack to make sure that you get your numbers to a healthy number so that you're able to perform. There are a lot of athletes out here that are type 1 diabetics and they do just fine. The last one is, because I'm type 1 diabetic, is treated solely with insulin, there will not be any advancements in treatment of the disease. So right now we know that there's no cure for type 1 diabetes, and the treatments that they have in management for diabetes, I mentioned if you're type 1, you're insulin dependent because your pancreas does not make any insulin. If you're type 2, your pancreas does make insulin, but your body just doesn't know what to do with it. So you can take the insulin, you can do it with the pen, with the insulin pen, or you can do it with the pump. You can have, the advances are the pen and the pump. The Dexcom is an advancement too, because you're able to see what your numbers are without sticking yourself. And the pump allows you to get that insulin without sticking yourself as well. So those are some of the advancements that have come along with being a diabetic. So just, if you know someone who's a type 1 diabetic, even type 2 diabetic, just be careful what you say, because sometimes people just say the wrong things. They feel like if you're eating something, they'll say, oh, you shouldn't be eating that. Like, oh, that's going to cause your sugar to go. That's too sweet. And it doesn't work that way. It doesn't matter if you're eating something sweet or if you're eating pasta, it doesn't matter. Like, whatever you eat is going to break down into sugar. So it doesn't mean because you're eating something sweet, it's going to make it go high. So, and stop saying, oh, do you have the bad type of diabetes or the good type of diabetes? Like, neither one of them are a good type to have. And especially if you're talking to the person that's dealing with it. So don't make them feel inadequate. Don't make them feel ashamed. Ask them some questions that'll help educate you on better understanding someone who's dealing with type 1 diabetes. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the show today. And if you know someone who's dealing with type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes, be kind, give them grace, educate yourself so that you can better not just understand them, but help them in some way. You just never know. Lisa said, thank you for all the research that you do. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Closing sponsor is Mary Kay with Gloria Dotton, and she's catering to all of our beauty needs from head to toe. Coming up at 7 p.m. is The People Show with Mark Wallace and Charles Thomas. So don't go anywhere. I'll leave you with these words of wisdom. Diabetics is like a roller coaster. You have your ups and you have your downs, but it's your choice to scream and enjoy the ride. So join me next Monday at 6 p.m. right here on Intellectual Radio. As always, thank you for tuning in to Warriors Talk with author and founder Lady ReShell, where we are changing lives one warrior at a time.
Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell. To find out more about Warriors Talk, follow at Warriors Talk, the number 1, on all social media outlets, and Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell on YouTube. Please join us next week and every Monday evening at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on intellectualradio.com for Warriors Talk with Lady ReShell, where we encourage, educate, and empower you into